Two friends were part of a night patrol in the French countryside. Returning, Jack discovered that Tommy was missing and insisted on crawling back out of the foxhole at daybreak to look for his friend. With great reluctance, the officer in charge gave Jack permission and watched as he worked his way into no man's land from a shell hole to shell hole. As night fell again, Jack returned, mortally wounded. As the medics did what they could, the officer said, "I hear you found Tommy." "Yes, sir, but he only lived for a few minutes." "I am sorry, Jack, and I wish that I had not let you go." "Oh no," Jack replied, "it was worth it. When I found Tommy, he said to me, 'Good old Jack, I knew you would come back.'" Let that be my first comment this evening to life runners. It's worth it. We cannot simply accept that human life is discarded, eliminated, or disdained. You and I have to offer hope, encouragement, and an alternative to an anti-life culture. I admire your name and consider ourselves bonded beyond the support and the handsome jacket. I am not much of a runner, except for sprints on the tennis court, but I do spend some 200 days a year running to catch planes, make connections, and meet those who are waiting to take me to my next pastoral visit. Responsibility for an archdiocese over which the sun is always rising means that the Archbishop travels in order to visit his flock. I cannot convoke them. I have to go to them. That is clearly running in a different sense, but it does attest to the value of life. I have come that you might have life and have it to the full, the Lord Jesus tells us. I try to ensure that spiritual reality, while your primary concern is that of the unborn, can experience life at all. Thank you again for that commitment. You know that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, of which, as you've just heard, I am unworthily the president, recognizes protecting the unborn as a primordial concern. That translates into sponsoring a committee, chaired by Bishop Daniel Thomas of Toledo, Ohio, to promote the dignity of the human person and to defend life from its beginning and to protect that same life to its natural end against those who would end human life for a variety of reasons. The creation narrative continually reminds us that God created, saw it was good, and continued with the rhythm of his creation, which did not bind him, but does bind us. It is important to remain convinced that the goodness of creation, as we celebrate and pray for the conviction that human dignity must be respected from conception to natural death. In this Jubilee year of hope, we recommit ourselves to being bearers, or perhaps better, runners of hope. As you know, that commitment makes us sensitive to the needs of mothers, especially those unprepared for this new moment in their lives. Since the launch of Walking with Moms in Need, Catholics in dioceses and parishes across the country have put the gospel of life into action, uniting in a shared mission to surround pregnant and parenting mothers in need with loving support and personal accompaniment. Heroic volunteers have stepped forward to make our parishes places where a mother can be connected with meaningful resources and assistance, and most importantly, know that she and her baby are not alone. That commitment leads us to live in a spirit of compassion and defense for the unborn, the voiceless, and the most fragile members of the human community. In that, we are united with Pope Francis, who has used some of the strongest language ever heard to describe those who would willfully end the life of a fellow human being, calling them hitmen. His is not a spirit of spite, but rather a desire to speak the truth in support of the defenseless. He related that concern to the quest for peace in his discourse to the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See in January 2023. And I quote, "Peace requires before all else the defense of life, a good that today is jeopardized not only by conflicts, hunger, and disease, but all too often, even in the mother's womb, through the promotion of an alleged right to abortion. No one, however, can claim rights over the life of another human being, especially one who is powerless and thus completely defenseless. For this reason, I appeal to the consciences of men and women of goodwill, particularly those having political responsibilities, to strive to safeguard the rights of those who are weakest and to combat the throwaway culture that also tragically affects the sick, the disabled, and the elderly. States have a primary responsibility to ensure that citizens are assisted in every phase of human life until natural death, and to do so in a way that makes each feel accompanied and cared for, even in the most delicate moments of his or her life. The commitment is complete and related to every category of human society. In fact, I would submit that the violence we see so often in contemporary society has its roots in this disregard for human life at its inception. After all, if I can decide who lives and who is denied birth, why can I not eliminate anyone who stands between my desires and me? I want that car, so I can kill someone to take it. I want your money, and you are in the way. By protecting the unborn is first and foremost a defense of all innocent human life. The mentality even has its effects on speech, political discourses, and approaches to problems. If I forget the dignity of the human person who disagrees with me, I can use any sort of language. I can dismiss him or her, or I can ridicule my opponent. Notice how often political discourse is reduced to ad hominem attacks that do not really address the facts or the merits of the case. We should always be mindful of the inherent dignity of the other as created in the image and likeness of God when we express our opinion or our disagreement. We also respect life by respecting those who disagree with us. What is not amazing, is it not amazing that Almighty God gave us 2 ears, but only 1 mouth? The reminder is to listen and find a way to convince our adversary of the wisdom of our position. That means keeping the total picture in mind. I always remember an experience I had when I was assigned to the nunciature in Paraguay. Paraguay is landlocked. And so if you want to go to the beach, you go to the rivers. And I was at the river with a group of young men. And we thought one of them was clowning around because he was trying to get our attention. And soon we discovered that he wasn't clowning around, but the other young man he was with was drowning because he really didn't know how to swim. And so I went over there. I know how to swim, but I'm certainly not trained in life-saving. But, there's that immediate reaction when you're trying to pull someone to shore that he resists. You have to convince him that you're actually on his side. It's the only time in my life, swimming, that I knew I was going to make it to shore, but I wasn't sure that he was going to come with me. Eventually he did. Thank you, Life Runners, for that respect. Please use every legal means to advance our cause, but always with respect for the dignity of others. Our cause obliges us to engage the legal system in assuring an adequate defense of our constitutional rights. I confess that I have always admired St. Paul's use of Roman law to defend himself and also to further his ministry. Thomas More is another example. He could only be condemned to death because an official perjured himself to obtain an office. He was careful to avoid giving the state other grounds on which to condemn him. The society was different then, but ours is more litigious, and we must be wise as serpents in our task. That respect also leads us to compassionate healing from others who willfully ended their children's lives in the womb. These women do experience a loss, and we must acknowledge that reality of their child or children and pray for them in their grief. A simple statement such as, "I'm sorry for your loss," can open hearts. We can pray for those who have been led or deceived into procuring an abortion. We must never forget the boundless mercy of God and encourage them to approach the sacraments or reconciliation. Many wrongly believe that abortion is an unforgivable sin. They may be longing to hear that God desires to forgive every sin of those who are sorry, even the sin of abortion. Such programs as Project Ratio and others help women and even men in these situations to find solace, taste the mercy of God, and reform their lives. We are attuned to the importance of healing, and you know that well. We are also not blind to the collateral effects of the suppressed life culture. When we begin to determine who is worthy of life, our concern or our vision, we run the risk of unconsciously adopting a Nazi approach to life and culture, as if some are more worthy of life and dignity than others. That brings us to our care for the poor, the immigrant, and those outside of our borders not as fortunate as we are. I am very mindful of how the Lord presents himself to us. He made it very clear in the 25th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel. The matter of the Last Judgment cannot surprise us. It is all there. I was naked, hungry, thirsty, homeless, sick, imprisoned, and you did or did not see me and attend or not attend to my needs. It is not rocket science. It is simply opening our eyes and looking beyond our needs and the demands of our selfish society and seeing Christ who presents himself to us. The gospel is not like a buffet where I can choose what like the sumptuous buffet we had this evening, that I can choose what I like and not take what does not appeal to me. It is complete and calls us to hear, believe, and act. When the Lord asked Cain where his brother Abel is, Cain asks if he is his brother's keeper. The answer is an undeniable yes. I remember well my first walk in the March for Life on the 22nd of January 1978, we walked on the snow. Bishop Welsh was behind me at one point. Our little group stopped at St. Joseph's on Capitol Hill and asked to celebrate Mass. No childred, no letter of good standing. Little did I know that I would eventually live in D.C. for now 17 years. Having spent a little less than half of my 73 years outside the borders of this great land, I have often reflected on how fortunate we are. However, that advantage, fortune, giftedness, means that our obligations are greater. St. Teresa of Calcutta taught us that we cannot decline to help the poor person in front of us because we cannot solve poverty in general. We do what we can, case by case, but we also try to influence national policy so that it reflects these inherent gospel and humanitarian values. I have seen that firsthand in the good work done by Catholic Relief Services, the Society for the Propagation of the Faith, Catholic Charities, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, and others. Our running for life also obliges us to run to protect and help prosper the life that is already born. It is a both-and proposition. Unfortunately, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops must cease its large-scale efforts in favor of migrants and refugees because the government will no longer give grants which did not even cover all the costs. These were made up by the charity of all the faithful. However, that merely means that we will have to find other ways to support the poor and the stranger. No doubt many in this room are descendants of immigrants. My paternal grandparents came here from Italy to make a new life, and my father, born in a New York tenement, began school unable to say a word in English. He too was a physician. My first Christmas in the Ivory Coast gave me an opportunity to help a missionary with masses in the various stations of his parish. We went to one on Christmas Day, and they offered us a midday meal. The religious woman with me assured me that we had to accept because this particular community never offered anything. It was the toughest chicken I have ever eaten. And the surroundings were very simple, but they offered what they had and wanted to show their concern and welcome. We can do no less. It is a reminder to keep ourselves informed, not only online, but learning how to evaluate what we find online. Pope Francis recently reminded us of the importance of literature, information, and education. In a culture of screens, we must read to learn and evaluate what is spewed forth. Literature opens us to an encounter with humanity. Speaking here from a Catholic perspective, a person is truly dead if no one helps him or her to see God. When I represented the Pope in Santo Domingo, a priest in one of the parishes there, who was from Spain, had a parish in an area of relative poverty in the city. He found resources to build a parish center beneath the church that had places to teach seamstresses, computer technology, and of course, our faith. He also put in large bathrooms because many in the parish had no running water. He was promoting life. You have accepted a mission to deepen the culture of life in our country. Your witness is often silent. What is truly effective is the Franciscan tradition, to preach the gospel always, and sometimes to use words. At times the task seems daunting, but I urge you not to lose hope. The history of faith and the path of justice have always been marked by men and women who believe and move forward to make a difference. Let me encourage you to make that difference. I have struggled with the last two administrations to protect the conscience rights of the men and women in uniform and those who serve at the VA medical centers. At the moment, we have a reprieve, but we cannot let our guard down. We cannot grow complacent. On the other side, there is profit and a misguided conviction. Those will not vanish, but do not lose heart. Remember Jack, who would not give up on his friend. We must not give up on life, but renew our commitment to defend it. Thank you for your invitation, but more importantly, thank you for your witness to life.
This is the same image that you see on our banner. And we know that this image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, you know the story, the single greatest conversion in Christianity was from that encounter with St. Juan Diego. So we offer it to you as you go around the world, as you preach the gospel. The artist, Nellie Edwards, is in North Dakota, and she wrote a note to you, to Archbishop Broglio.